Well, this did not win again, losing both games to the Tigers, including 3-1 today. But Mitch Keller starts and pitches well yet again. So what does that mean? I am Mike Asti, and this is your Pirates postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course, Pittsburgh Baseball Now. Gave the North Shore 9 guys a game off here as they've joined the fold. And I'm going to be talking with John Perrotto, who is one of the most tenured Pirate beat writers around, and right now is available at a myriad of outlets there, including the AP and several others. Talked with him before, happy to always talk with him here, so happy to be talking to him again. And John, the Pirates do lose this 3-1, but I do want to kind of not make sure we don't bury the lead here, and I do want to talk about Mitch Keller. Obviously, this is the hype train. This is the guy that many Pirate fans have been expecting more from now for several years. And to put it bluntly, it's been a disappointment. The hype train's been hard to get behind, certainly for Pirate fans, and even the most optimistic have been pretty pessimistic about Mitch Keller. Spring was great, start the season not so great, but recently now it's kind of feeling like it's picking up again. I'm even hearing from people around baseball that don't cover the Pirates or aren't Pirate fans, where they're maybe saying you might want to get back on the Mitch Keller train. Only allowing the 1 run on 4 hits here through 6 innings, which is pretty far for any Pirates pitcher. They don't win the game, but what's your feelings around Mitch Keller right now? Maybe what's caused this turnaround? Is this maybe a couple starts here? Let's not get too excited. Or has the confidence level increased a little bit that maybe we're going to see a little bit more of the good Mitch Keller than we've seen in recent years?
You know, I can't help but wonder when they moved him into the bullpen, and not in a regular relief role where you might get called in at any time, but where he was kind of what they'd call piggyback starter, coming in after the starter to set time. He followed an opener one time and a starter the other. I don't know, maybe that gave him a little different perspective instead of starting a game, sitting in a bullpen, watching a couple innings, and then coming in because, he pitched well in LA. I mean, he did walk 5 guys in 5 innings, but to his credit, he was able to pass that and only allow 2 runs in 5 innings to an outstanding Dodger team. And then, obviously the Tigers not as good as the Dodgers, one of the weaker hitting teams in the big leagues so far, but they do have a lot of legitimate big league hitters in their lineup. And Keller really looked good against them today. So maybe it was that little trip to the bullpen. Maybe that just gave him a little change of mindset, but certainly encouraging for one of the few times in the 4 years he's been in the major leagues to see him string together a couple of good outings in a row instead of 1 good, 2 bad, 1 bad, 2 good, or, really 1 good. But to see him do this is an encouraging sign, but also I'm going to wait a little bit more because I'd like to see him do this for more than a couple of starts. But it is a positive sign. And I think what he showed really today is, what scouts have always talked about, how he has great stuff, top of the rotation stuff. And it really seemed to play today. He really seemed very crisp. His fastball was crisp. He had a really good slider. And I see on a day like today, you can see why people in baseball and the Pirates get excited about this guy and still think he can be a quality big league pitcher.
Yeah, and obviously it's still about the future for this Pirate franchise. Nobody expecting this team to win the pennant this year, of course, and there's opinions on whether it's 1, 2, 3 years away and the whole thoughts on Ben Cherington's rebuild, but there's still more time needing to be seen here. So it is a positive to see a pitcher with hype that is young, that has maybe number 1 stuff, even though he's not pitched like it, pitch well enough to win and go through 6, even though the team doesn't win. And you do mention that he has been hot and cold, and it's been 1 good and then 3 bad, or even 3 good and then 2 or 3 really bad. So you have Miguel Cabrera out there. You have a Tigers lineup with some quality hitters, even though they're not a great team. You have the Dodgers, and that's in the midst of the sweep where he pitched really well, as you mentioned. And even the starts prior to that have been okay. So I guess you're in the wait and see approach, but I did throw out a question on Twitter in terms of confidence level of whether now you're extremely confident at all, maybe still wait and see, or not so confident because you need to see this more in a string of consecutive starts. Where would you fall on that? Is it a wait and see? I guess you answered it.
Yeah, I would say wait and see, with the fact that I'm a little more optimistic that there's going to be a good outcome as everyone waits and sees
Okay.
than I would have been a couple weeks ago. I really have seen. This is the most progress I've seen from Mitch Keller in the 4 years or parts of 4 years in which he's been in the major leagues. I really thought today is about as well as he's pitched in any of his, 45, 46, whatever it is, big league starts now.
Yeah.
He really looks sharp.
I mean, the numbers are there. So 1 run off 4 and 6 in this one, 7 strikeouts, only walking 2. So that's what you really want to see out of a K to walk ratio for a guy with potentially top of the rotation type of stuff. You mentioned the Dodgers start, 2 runs off only allowing a couple hits again through 5. And Derek Shelton has been pretty open in saying, I know no starters throughout baseball are going as deep as they've been in past years. Obviously, we've seen a Hall of Famer get yanked in the midst of what could have been a no-hitter or a perfect game through only a quality start, not more. But Derek Shelton's even been more gun shy. He's even been very open saying 3-4 innings is likely max. Mitch Keller is a guy where he's been willing to leave in whether the start is good or bad. 6-5, only goes 3-2 in the prior 2 starts, which weren't great, but only allowing 1 run. 4-4, 6-4, 5, and 4 in his prior starts. And it's a myriad of good and bad. Yeah. Why do you think, from someone who's been around this team, has covered this team for so long, and obviously covered the Derek Shelton regime for a couple years now, why is Derek Shelton's plan of no matter what, I'm not letting a pitcher go long into games, one way with everybody else and different with Mitch Keller? Good, bad, or ugly, he's letting Mitch Keller pitch. Is it because he thinks he's a future one and he wants to show Ben Tarrington, here's your example, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, Mike. I really do. I think they still truly believe that Mitch Keller has the stuff to be a top of the rotation guy. Maybe not a true number one of the best in the league guys, but certainly maybe the ceiling of a number 2, which is pretty good because you don't even have a whole lot of those guys in the major leagues anymore. And I think they want him to become the kind of guy, because he does have the stuff, he does have the pitches to maybe get them through more than twice through the order like some of their other pitchers. They want to see him be a kind of guy that can get them 3 times through the order, pitch 6 innings, maybe pitch into the 7th inning occasionally, maybe even pitch into the 8th once in a while. I mean, they feel he has the stamina, they feel he has the pitches to do this, and they're trying to develop him into that type of pitcher. And and maybe, just maybe today, and again, I don't like to put too much emphasis on one start.
Yeah.
But if he throws remotely like he does today, he's a guy can pitch 6 innings and go through the lineup a 3rd time. And I think that's what they're trying to get him to. And maybe today was a bit of a breakthrough in that, with the way he pitched and as deep as he went into the game.
It could have been. Again, this team doesn't win, but it depends on how you're evaluating the season and what you're watching for. And Mitch Keller, back-to-back quality starts. He faces a former Triple Crown hitter, a Hall of Famer. That's one of the hits, but only allowing 4 and goes through 6 and 7 Ks, 2 walks. Again, all positive. He pitched well enough to win. John Perrotto joining me here, our Pirates postgame show on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Baseball Now. Flipping it, though, to maybe less positive signs on the pitching mound, and this is who came in relief, and Oneil Cruz, former starter turned reliever. It's been great most of the time out of the pen. What happened today? Just an aberration? Any thoughts there on this game getting away from him and him allowing that kind of kerosene on the fire?
I think it was more of an aberration. He's been somebody who's really impressed me this year. When he was a starter last year, his first year here after coming over from the Nationals in the Josh Bell trade, I thought, this guy, he's okay. Maybe he'd be a number 5 starter at best. But, he's looked good out of the bullpen, in shorter bursts. It looks like he's pretty good. And I think it was just one of those days where he didn't have it. And, over a course of a 6-month season, pretty much every relief pitcher is going to give it up now and again. And I really think that was just one of these days. He's had enough impressive outings so far this season, 2 months in, to think that this guy's going to be a pretty good reliever. Not a dominant closer, maybe not a dominant 8th inning guy on a really good team, but if and when they do get good again, he looks like somebody who can at least be a bullpen piece on a good team, especially here in Pittsburgh. He's only 26, so he's not all that old. And I wouldn't get too alarmed about today. If it happens again the next time out, the time after that, then yeah, maybe there's a problem. But I think he's built up enough goodwill on his resume this season, no pun intended, that he's allowed to have a day like this.
Yeah, it's hard to get on him when you look at the spread there for Oneil Cruz. So you look at, again, this is a guy that hadn't allowed runs in so many consecutive appearances. And then you see what happens here in this game. The Pirates do lose this one 3-1. It's also a Pirates team that prior to these games against Detroit had won 5 out of 6. Obviously, the sweep of the Dodgers, winning the season series of the Dodgers, even taking care of business against Arizona, granted not to the level of Los Angeles, but made you maybe feel a little bit good if you're a Pirate fan that, okay, they're not just going to all of a sudden implode after a historic series win. You get to this one, it just doesn't work out for Pittsburgh. We know what happened last night. Overall thoughts on the struggles with the Tigers and what's been going on now these last couple games, because the offense has quieted down a little bit after really showing up and, I guess, quote unquote, exploding for a while. You can't read too much into a series or two with 162 games and a Pirate team that's not supposed to contend. But what's caused it to dip back to the mean, which has now caused these losses?
Well, I think part of it, they ran into two pretty good young pitchers in Tarek Skubal and Alex Faedo, last night and today. I think that's part of it. The one thing that discouraged me a little in this series was, especially in the game on Tuesday night, the opener of the series, was there was a whole lot of bad base running. And that's one of the things, and it's something I mentioned in one of Derek Shelton's pregame press conferences earlier in the homestand, that seemed to be something they'd really gotten better at this year, was base running, because Mike, the last couple of years they've just ran themselves into some silly outs on the bases, and they really haven't done that as much this year.
We were at the anniversary to that Cubs blooper reel, I believe, about a week ago. Yes. Yeah, that's maybe the most blooper reel you could have in a century. So yes, you're correct.
And it just seems like they've eliminated a lot of the base running mistakes, and they really cropped up in the game last night, and that was a little discouraging to see. But really, Tarek Skubal is having a really good year. His ERA is around 2.25, and he's won 4 starts in a row. So, he's been holding down a lot of teams that he's faced this year. He's been a tough matchup. And Alex Faedo, he's made 7 starts so far. Now, granted, a lot of them he's only pitched 5 innings, but he's had to give up more than 2 runs in any of his first 7 big league starts. So I think part of it, they ran into a couple good young Tiger pitchers. And I think sometimes it just happens, especially a short series like this. But other than the base running on Tuesday, I'm not really discouraged what I saw. I just think they just got beaten, and that happens sometimes.
It does. Now, it happened to the Pirates maybe more than others, as they are 24-30. But yes, it does happen. I'm going to pull a John Perrotto there, giving you the obvious. Yes, it does happen. Again, the Pirates lose this one 3-1, losing these two games to Detroit after winning the 5 out of 6, including the sweep of the Dodgers, and then the series win over Arizona. Now, what I also do want to talk about here, and this goes more to the lineup offensively, and certainly I'm going to get into now Vogelbach being back and the struggles of Reynolds yet again after his big at bat a few games ago. But Travis Swaggerty getting into this lineup now, we do see a pinch hit at bat here. When are we going to see more of him? Thoughts on others being called up, and even maybe opinions on the timing of Travis Swaggerty and him getting called up? Because it seemed to me, and I don't cover obviously as close as you do covering the Pirates and having done so for so long, there was no other way they could hold him back. Really, it seemed like the rubber had met the road and he had to come up when he did. But thoughts on others coming up, Oneil Cruz and company, him coming up, and when we're going to see more of him outside pinch hit at bats, and then how that's going to impact this lineup overall, because Vogelbach returns, Michael Chavis leaves the lineup. He had actually been hitting Vogelbach on base prior, but this lineup's kind of back to struggling again, as I mentioned earlier, and Hayes hits, nobody else does. And if Reynolds is in kind of a cold week, you're kind of screwed. But does Travis Swaggerty kind of upset the apple cart a little bit and maybe help out the lineup?
Yeah, that's the one thing. They still don't have enough consistent big league hitters up and down the lineup to be one of the better offensive teams in the league, or really even an average offensive team at this point. And that's just going to take some time as they keep adding more kids from the minors and let them just take their lumps for a while and develop. I think in Swaggerty's case, I mean, he was their number one pick in 2018 as a college player. So this is like 5 years he's been in pro ball as a college player. And I mean, at some point, you got to find out about him and see, can he play up in the big leagues or not? And he was playing very well at Indianapolis here in the last couple weeks, month, and they thought it was time to give him a look. And it'll be interesting to see what they do, because they're trying to fit 4 outfielders into 3 spots now, and obviously Brian Reynolds is going to play every day. So now you're trying to get enough playing time for 3 young rookies, and Sawinski and Kyle Mitchell and Swaggerty, and try to fill them into 2 spots, because you kind of are limited to Vogelback at DH and Chavez at first. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it. And I do wonder if maybe a Vogelback would continue to struggle. I mean, they're not paying him a whole lot. I believe his salary is only $2 million this year. Right. Maybe at some point you cut ties with him and you move and, rotate those kids, one of them through the designated hitter spot every day, so you can get all 3 of them into the lineup. I mean, just spitballing. Nobody from the Pirates has told me that, or it's no indication that may be a plan, but it just seems like something that would make some sense.
Yeah, I mean, it would make some sense. And I guess in a way, it could be a good problem to have, that maybe you feel like your farm is good enough to bring these kids up maybe earlier than expected. Obviously, Travis Swaggerty been around a while. You got to see what he has now, but Oneil Cruz and others could come up maybe before September, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, the lineup's it's only going to be, there's a ceiling to it. It's only going to be so much. But I think the point of it is, you mentioned Travis Swaggerty playing some of the outfield. So we've seen him at left. We've seen him at center. Hasn't got a hit yet. Bottom of the lineup. Question would be, is there going to be an ascension to the lineup, or does that require just on him hitting? Because maybe you could bring him up to see what happens, since the others in front of him also aren't hitting. Vogelbach, the thinking probably was that if he kept doing what he did the first month and a half of the season, maybe they would get something and trade him for some value, because he does have a 30 home run season in the big leagues only a couple years ago. That seems weird, but it's the case. But yeah, if you have to bench him, then that's going to hurt that situation. So maybe you wouldn't. You have Reynolds, you have Hayes obviously at the top. It's hard to move that, but what else do you do? So is there an opportunity for Travis Swaggerty to ascend in the order, whether or not he hits? And what position would he mostly play? How does this work? And does any of these position issues impact what happens with an Oneil Cruz or others who are still waiting to come up? Because there's a whole debate if Oneil Cruz has a position. So if he has no position and he comes up into this position mess, even though you're not a contender, there's a lot of things to think about for a manager for a season that's not supposed to win.
Yeah, there really is. And, that's kind of the fun part for the rest of the season, because I mean, obviously I don't think there's going to be a pennant race here this year. Sure. But it will be interesting to see how they start to try to fit all the pieces together. Like you just mentioned, some of the different ways they can go. I think the one thing, when Oneil Cruz does come up, whenever that may be, he's going to play somewhere. He's going to play every day. I don't think they're going to play him 2 days and sit him for a day. Swaggerty is a center fielder. Maybe they move Brian Reynolds at the deadline. I still question whether Brian Reynolds is a long-term piece here. He is 27 years old, and he's signed to a team-friendly contract through next year, which makes him very attractive to a lot of teams that need an outfielder. And you just wonder, by the time they get good, he's starting on the downside of his career. So maybe that's the move, to get all 3 of them into the lineup later on this season. I'm just, it's a possibility. But I do think when Cruz comes, he's going to be the everyday shortstop until he proves he can't play the position. I know they've played him in the outfield a little bit in Indianapolis, and they want him so when he does come up, if he shows that he can't cut it as a shortstop at the big league level, they don't want to move him to the outfield without having at least a little bit of experience there in the minor leagues. So, but every indication I get is when Cruz does come, and I got a feeling it might be a little more sooner than later, because he is starting to play
I
better.
was going to ask you. He had a slow start. Obviously, there was debate at the beginning of the year, but that has all passed now. There's no financial benefit, I guess, of keeping him down there, but you do want to see him play well before coming up.
No, and I think what you need to do too is reward the guy for playing well. I know there was a little frustration on both ends here. Cruz was frustrated. I think he put a little more stock into those 2 games that he played at the beginning of his major league career at the end of last season. I think, from what I've been told and just the feeling I had just in a couple of days, he was up here last year. I think he thought when they called him up last year that meant he was their shortstop this year, like from opening day on. And I think that was the impression he got himself. I really don't think anybody with the Pirates told him like, hey, when you come to spring training next year, you're going to be our shortstop. And I think there was a little frustration on his end. I think he thought that it was his job now. And the Pirates were a little frustrated for him to have the audacity to think based on 2 games that he was starting shortstop.
Right.
And, then he went down and he pouted a little bit. He got off to a bad start. And, I wasn't there in Indianapolis, but, you talk to people in the organization and scouts that see him play. And he pouted a little. He was a little upset that he was in AAA. He thought he was going to be in the big leagues. But, once the reality hit in after a couple of weeks, like, hey, I'm here to I play better and move up. He started to play better, and I think once he shows just a little more consistency, I think they'll bring him up. I don't think he's going to be on the farm like the September. I think we'll see him before then.
Yeah, maybe he thought he was Key Brian Hayes level, that you get the cup of coffee and then you're there, good, bad, or indifferent in the hype train rolls and MLB Network, and that's not going to be the case. Although, obviously, Oneil Cruz still figured to be a part of the future, so they're going to give him plenty of rope like they gave Travis Swaggerty, like they gave Cole Tucker, really, to be fair, before eventually cutting bait, and that didn't work out. John Perrotto here, Mike Asti. Our Pirates post-game show. This one after the Pirates 3-1 loss to Detroit, losing both of these 2 games in this series to Detroit after winning 5 out of 6, including the sweep of the Dodgers. I do want to also, ask you, because you look at Castro and others, and maybe that's just the plug out. If Oneil Cruz comes in, Castro just plugs out of the lineup possibly, because that seems like offensively that would be the biggest help for this team. But of course, Oneil Cruz, there's still some concern about playing shortstop, but I imagine Castro just gets plugged out.
Yeah, most likely. But, I think with Diego Castillo, I think he could be a pretty good utility player. I mean, he's a decent shortstop. He plays a decent second. Castillo, he plays a decent third. He has some hitting. And, not all of these kids are going to be everyday players in the big leagues. And that's okay, because you need depth if you're going to be a winning team in the major leagues, and that's part of what separates them now, why they're not a very good team, or not even a decent team, I should say, because they don't have that kind of depth right now. Right. But if they can develop that depth, if say Rodolfo Castro and Diego Castillo are your utility infielders, those are 2 pretty good guys to have on the bench if they develop into good, big league players. Same in the outfield. Maybe Travis Swaggerty only ends up being a 4th outfielder in the big leagues. Maybe that's Cal Mitchell. He ends up only as a 4th outfielder. And there's nothing wrong with having a quality player on the bench. I mean, so actually, I don't think this is the good sign that they have these questions about how is everything going to fit, because it's good to have more pieces of the puzzle than you need.
It's good to have questions. It's good to have a fun tinkering of lineups and seeing what a manager is going to do in a season that's not supposed to go anywhere. I guess this is more fun for Derek Shelton than I'm imagining the COVID year was, where you just had no chance and you're just throwing your hands up in the air every day. So I get that. And I even noticed the vibe and the personality of Derek Shelton kind of coming out a little bit. Kind of seemed like a little frustrated and sore a couple of years ago, where, hey, what do you want me to do? Here, maybe you're able to have some fun, and maybe he's able to prove himself that he can be actually the manager whenever this team gets good, because some thought maybe it was a bridge situation. But yeah, it does feel like offensively plugging out those infielders, whoever it is, and plugging out maybe Cruz would be a benefit. But again, does he stabilize at shortstop? John Perrotto, Mike Asti here as we round the bases out, and you're giving me most of that glass half full take, John. So Pirate fans may like that. Although I'd imagine if Travis Swaggerty ends up as your 4th outfielder long term, that's glass half empty. I think it fell over, spilled out a little bit. Yeah. That's maybe some negative therefore the future of the Pirates as they're still trying to figure things out. I just want to quickly flip to the Atlanta series now with several in a row, the four game slate against the Braves. JT Brubaker taking the mound. And while there's hype around Mitch Keller and obviously a wait and see approach, but needing him to get going and be consistent, there are others like that as well. And there's been Quintana and others who have been pitching well most of the year, even if expectations weren't there. But JT Brubaker, and this goes back a couple years now, was supposed to kind of, this team isn't good. They're not a real number one, but he's supposed to be the quote unquote ace or number one of this team, even if it's not good. He certainly hasn't pitched the best. He certainly hasn't pitched like a number one. He certainly has also struggled to put starts together in a row and have those be quality starts. You could argue Mitch Keller's done a better job recently than JT Brubaker's done all season long. Is there pressure, and what kind of pressure is on JT Brubaker to put one start on the board, whether the team wins or loses, and give you a Keller-like start like this? He's older. He might not be part of the future, but is there pressure on him to show something, even if it's for trade value?
Oh, I think at some point, yeah. I mean, just you can't be on a hall pass indefinitely in the big leagues, even on a rebuilding team. And, I talked to JT about this a little bit the other day, and he knows it. I mean, he realizes this is the big leagues. This is his third year, and at some point he's got to produce better. He thinks he's close to really pitching a lot better. He thinks, he's not that far off. What's he going to say? I don't think he's going to say, hey, you know what? I'm overwhelmed here. I really don't know why I'm in the big leagues. So, I look at him and I see on a good team, if and when the Pirates get good, and it's an if, not necessarily when they get good. We'll see if this whole rebuilding works or not. I think it'd be a good weapon out of the bullpen with that slider, where he could just come in and throw about 75% sliders and just go right after hitters for like an inning or two. I really think, and I hate to write a guy off as a starter, but if he doesn't improve, I still think there's a place for him on the roster. And I think that's as a reliever where he can narrow down his repertoire and just not worry about.
With Will Crow. Seems like they finally found something with Will Crow, whereas if they didn't make that move, it might not have happened. I mean, obviously, for a much higher ceiling, it got John Smoltz in the Hall of Fame after being great and then getting injured, and he gets there because of what he did as a reliever. So it has worked for guys, and right now on this team with Will Crow.
Yeah, so I think there's still value there. Maybe Brubaker doesn't become a long-term starter in the big leagues, and I think that's certainly possible. I wouldn't totally write him off yet, but I'm very intrigued by that slider that he throws. I mean, it can be a wipeout slider, and when you only have to throw it for 1 or 2 innings instead of trying to keep it in reserve and mix your pitches up for 5 or 6 innings, I just think he'd be a real good weapon to come into the 7th or 8th inning of a game. With that slider, it can be a wipeout pitch, and especially, like I said, in a situation where you're only facing 3, 4, 5, 6 hitters, I think he could be a pretty good reliever. I really do.
Yeah, and if you feel like a pitcher maybe has one quality pitch, especially if it's a really special pitch, but not others, and can't switch it around, that screens reliever as well. But 0-5, a 4.70 ERA, 53 Ks to 24 walks, but a lot of home runs allowed in there too, which has created some of those bad starts for JT. And you also got to figure that he's likely not a part of the future of this team either way, but the trade value for him is going to be nothing at this point. And they probably thought going into last year, at the very least, JT, maybe Brian Reynolds, as you mentioned earlier, they still could trade him because it does that extension he signed. I don't know if everyone got that. That kind of opened up the doors for the small market contenders like a Twins to say, now I can go after Reynolds because I'm locked into not paying him tons. Whereas before he might have just been, a Yankees player money wise. So maybe those players could have been the trade bait, maybe Vogelbach as well. But if Vogelbach struggles, he gets bent, JT gets out of the rotation. Who are they trading? Even though they have all these different things they could finagle with this lineup and with the rotation here the rest of the year. John, I definitely appreciate the time. We'll definitely be talking to you again here on this channel, and all the best to you. I know we can find you in a myriad of places. Anything you want to plug? Because I know you're all over the place, the AP and several.
Oh, just Google me. You'll find me, I guess. I'm not a very good self-promoter. So
okay.
I'm around probably. Pretty anywhere but Ladies' Home Journal's about the only place I don't work for, so I couldn't find me.
All right, John Perrotto, he is everywhere, and maybe we'll get him to cover the Pirates or something. He covers more than just the Pirates, covers baseball, covers it all. A couple of years ago, did a simulated season before we knew we were actually going to get some baseball. And that might be the best work he ever did, John. I know it's under the radar. I love all the stuff, but that was fantastic as well. You can find him somewhere.
I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and also find him on Twitter, of course, at @JPerrotto over there. So that'll do it. The Pirates do lose this. They're getting back to the norm there. A couple losses after, maybe getting you excited a little bit. But of course, at least this team has been much more entertaining and exciting than they've been in recent years, even if the losses are there and some of these decisions about what this team can do in the lineup or staff. At least there's maybe some, let's figure this out, and this could be a positive. So there's reason for the glass to be half full, not always half empty, even though it's likely kind of lukewarm and in the middle. But that'll do it for this edition of the show. Thanks again, John.